Hello, everybody. Pink Camera Magic here, and with me I have Dr. Eric James McDonnough. And for those of you who don't know who Eric James McDonnough is, he is also known as DOC Justice. And he's actually done a lot and has achieved a lot. He's a law named after him. And sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry. Anyways, if you don't mind, just tell my viewers a little bit about yourself, and then I guess we just go from there.
I like to think of myself as just kind of a regular guy. I like to spend time doing yard work and planting fruit trees, and try to keep my neighborhood nice. And it all started back in 2012. There's an officer in my neighborhood who was speeding through the neighborhood, running stop signs, and ran me off the road one day. And I stopped in front of his house to ask him to drive respectfully and obey the law. And when we finished the conversation, I left, I walked away. Then he chased me down and held me for about an hour and a half, had 12 officers come, told me if I walked on my street past the stop sign, I'm getting arrested for trespass, and told me I better not file a complaint or it wasn't going to be good for me. I don't deal very well with threats to particularly my First Amendment rights. And so I waited for a couple months for things to kind of settle down a little bit. And then I called IA and left a message saying I wanted to file a complaint, just left my name and contact information, didn't say the officer's name, the date, or anything. They didn't call me back. A month later, I called, left another message, and they didn't call me back. And then about a month after that, I get a stalking restraining order where the officer in his restraining order says that IA told him I was trying to file a complaint, and IA advised him to file complaints against me first. And so I hired an attorney to start dealing with that. And then about a month later, I see some blue lights out my window. I walk outside and I'm arrested from in front of my house for aggravated stalking and corruption through threatening a police officer. I had to hire another attorney to deal with that, and all charges got dismissed. So I went and met with the chief of police to file a complaint. He will let me file a complaint. So I recorded the meeting I had with him. And when they closed up the IA file, none of the evidence I gave him was in there. So I filed a records request, learning how to do records requests from Jeff Gray, who's one of my heroes. And Chief Roll had claimed I didn't give him any documents. So I used my recording in the email chain for the records request. I made a video showing that Chief Roll committed felony records destruction, put it up on YouTube. And then I get the letter from the state attorney threatening me that if I record cops again in the future without their consent, I'm going to prison. So that was the first lawsuit I actually filed, was against Catherine Fernandez Rundle, the Miami-Dade state attorney.
Let me back up really quick here. Sure. Without giving too much details, just FYI, just let everyone know right ahead of time. You've filed 9 lawsuits, right?
9 so far.
9 so far. Can you really quick, without getting into details, because you can talk about each one, we'll go back to where you left off here, but just really briefly explain each lawsuit, what they're for. And then
okay, so
pick up where you started.
Yeah, so the first one was McDonnough V Rundle. That's where I sued the Miami State Attorney for the right to record. That went to the 11th Circuit. Then the state attorney tried to take it to the Supreme Court. They denied hearing it. So my 11th Circuit win their stands. And they didn't reach the First Amendment issues, but they said the wiretap statute didn't have any basis and didn't apply to me recording police. So I think we kind of didn't establish it was a First Amendment right. However, that was already established, but we did get to show that recording police officers, even secretly, even in a closed door meeting in their office, doesn't violate the law. So basically we have a right to record them. Probably the next lawsuit, I don't know if it was the second or the third one I filed a lawsuit against Miami-Dade Police Department because they had censored me and deleted my comments from their Facebook page. That was the third lawsuit of its type in the country. And within a week of me filing the lawsuit, they unblocked everybody they had blocked from all their social media. They changed their social media policies. And then a week later, they agreed to settle and pay my attorney. I wasn't looking for damages. I just wanted them to change their policy. So I was successful. So I felt pretty good about that. The officer that started all, Officer Aliana Merguido, because he lied and filed false criminal charges against me and filed false stalking injunctions against me, I filed a lawsuit against him for defamation. That's ongoing. Hopefully we'll get to trial or start scheduling the trial pretty soon in that. Because I was going on to police blogs and putting out the evidence of the cops who had retaliated against me. Obviously, they don't like it when you expose them. So they
I think I lost you there. Ah, can you hear me? I can't hear you. If you can hear me, go ahead and click on the invitation again and see if we can get you uploaded again. I think you have some bandwidth issues. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, Eric has a lot going on. And I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put all the links in the description box to a lot of these videos. He has a lot of videos of him attending meetings, being arrested, there's depositions, and he did all this, well, most of this pro se, excuse me. And so basically what that means is he was representing himself during this process. And while you're here, make sure you like, subscribe. Oh, here we go. Hello?
Hi, can you hear me, Amanda?
Yes, I can.
All right, I'm just going to go back to the laptop. My phone keeps powering down for some reason. I got battery, but.
No problem. Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Oh, great. So I'll go back. Sorry about that. So I was saying that after I was exposed or writing on the police blogs and exposing the corruption and retaliation against me, they went ahead and they doxed me. They doxed my wife. They put out our phone numbers, our addresses, emails, who we work for, salary, all that. And then they wanted to up the ante a little bit farther and say that I was just upset because I got thrown in a mental institution because my wife sleeps with a cop. It's totally untrue. There was about 130 comments I screenshotted. One of them was, I'm paranoid when they drive past my house, but they're really just stopping by to see if my wife's here so they can get a blowjob. They wrote that, they sleep with my wife and I'm calling a civil rights violation. And it was a search because they went so deep, and it was a seizure because they banged her over and over, but you should have heard her scream and she climaxed. And so obviously, I wasn't a big fan of all that. So I filed another defamation lawsuit, which I still haven't even gotten a judge assigned to yet. I'm trying to find the IP addresses so I can identify which officers are anonymously making the phone calls. Then we get to my public records lawsuits. I've had 3. My lawsuit I just filed recently was my 3rd public records lawsuit. The first one, I won at trial, but then got overturned on appeal. Nothing I can do about it now. However, I do have a little bit of comfort knowing that the only reason they won was because the attorneys lied, which I can prove. Then I filed a major civil rights lawsuit where I was suing 3 agencies and a whole bunch of police officers, starting from the incident when they chased me down, arrested me, and then other retaliations. I hired an attorney for that. The attorney wasn't very good and didn't file things on time and didn't draft the complaint properly, so it got dismissed. So that's at appeal at the 11th Circuit. That's my 2nd pro se appeal at the 11th Circuit. And then they had arrested me 2 times in 2016 for speaking out at the city council meetings. They trespassed me. I was walking away. They arrested me and made a bunch of lies. And so
they said that you grabbed your crotch and told them go fuck yourself or something and gave them the finger. And
yeah, I did give them the finger. I'm not gonna lie. I gave them the finger. So they kicked me out at the July 2016 meeting, and me and Carlos were talking. We were going to write. I had it all on video, and we were going to write a story for that. And Carlos didn't want to publish the article immediately because he was afraid that if we gave him a lot of time, they would figure out a way to retaliate against me. So we wait till the night before the August meeting, we publish the story. When I go into City Hall for the August meeting, the same officer who kicked me out in July came up to me, said that he wanted to speak to me outside. I walked outside, and he told me because of my comments and behavior at the last month's meeting, I was being trespassed. Asked him if I could get it in writing. He said there would be a report written. I asked him how I could contest it. He told me to write a letter. So I said, all right, you have a great day. Look forward to seeing you in the depositions, and walked away. As I'm walking away, he continues to talk trash. And so I responded, I'm leaving, buddy, bye-bye. And I gave him the bird. Then 21 police officers, including the chief, stormed out of City Hall. They arrested me, and they said that They trespassed me. They told me to leave. I took 10, 15 steps away. I stopped. I turned around. I waited for a minute or two. I wouldn't leave. I grabbed my genitals. I flicked them off, and I screamed, "Fuck you." I was recording it, but we also got all the security footage from the city from 6 different angles, and the police officers even recorded on their own cell phone, which proved that they had made false statements. So then I went online to the police blog, and I called the officers cowards and liars and put out my evidence. And then a week later, I get arrested for witness tampering and stalking. I'm kicking me out in July. The arrest for trespass, and then disorderly conduct, and then the other arrest for witness tampering and cyber stalking. We just filed another lawsuit on about 2 months ago. So that's basically the lawsuits I have.
So did they ever, are you still, what's the deal with like the trespass and these charges? Are they still pending? Have they been dropped? The criminal charges.
All the charges against me have been dropped. The city rescinded the trespass, but in Florida, there's 11th Circuit case that controls Florida. It's Catron v. City of St. Petersburg. Authorities can't trespass you from public property where the public is free to come and go. So, I mean, if there's a park that closes at 8 o'clock and you're there after 8 o'clock, you can be trespassed. But if it's during the day, people are free to come and go, they can't trespass you. They're not allowed to trespass you from a sidewalk, which is where I was at when I was arrested for trespass.
It's open to the public, and it's the time, the reasonable time, place, manner restrictions don't apply.
And exactly. So they never rescinded the trespass, but my attorney told me it was illegal. And he's like, I dare them to arrest you for it. Just go back into City Hall and continue to do your thing. So I just marched back into City Hall later after the charges were dropped and continued to do my thing. And they haven't said boo to me since then, basically.
Good. So basically they learned their lesson, hopefully, and they know better now, and they know that they were wrong at the very least.
Well, they at least know that I always have cameras on me and I record everything. And so if they want to lie, it's
the beginning. God. So tell me about this last lawsuit then that you filed a couple days ago.
I filed that in March. So in my defamation lawsuit against the officer, there's a debate on when the statute of limitations started. The argues that it would have started in April 9th. I argued it wouldn't have started till April the 15th. There's a 2-year limit. I filed on April the 13th, and 2 years later, thinking I was 2 days early, they're arguing I was 4 days late. They filed a motion to dismiss. They lost on that argument back in 2015, and they've just been stalling and stalling since then. And they took my deposition a couple months ago, and the attorney was questioning me about the dates. And then a day or two after the deposition, the attorney contacted my attorney and threatened us with their attorney fees, which were probably $50,000 or $60,000 if I didn't dismiss the case because it was frivolous because of the statute of limitations. However, they had already lost on that point. So there's also a provision in Florida law that if the person is out of state, the statute of limitations is paused. So I wanted to find if the officer had left out of state, so I filed a records request for all his leave slips.
Oh.
Yeah, so on February the 18th, I filed a records request for the leave slips. The next day on the 19th, they sent me an email acknowledging the records request. Roughly 3 weeks go by. I don't hear anything. So on Friday, March the 8th, I filed a lawsuit for them not giving me the records. Then Monday, March the 11th, miraculously, they have the records and they provide them to me. Mm. Or I should say they provided me some of the records.
Oh, okay.
On the next day on the 12th, I went and amended my lawsuit to note that they had given me some records, but I still asked the court to determine if their delay was unlawful. The next day, the judge issued an alternative writ of mandamus, which is basically a show cause order, and gave the city 20 days to explain in writing on their delay and why they didn't give me the records. The city responded. I filed a reply to their response. I asked for the immediate hearing the way the judge said there would be one, and then the judge just comes out and dismisses the case, claiming that the city is claiming they've given me all the records, and I didn't contest it. However, I did contest it, so that's when I was at court today. I was filing a motion for rehearing or to vacate, which might or might not be successful, but if it's not, I'm set up for the appeal, and I'll just go and file another appeal. I'm getting pretty good at appeals. So.
It sounds like it. I mean, I thought you were a doctor, not a lawyer.
But what's funny with this records request, though,
is, like I said, I filed it on February the 18th. They acknowledged it on February the 19th, and they sent it to the police department on the 19th. On the 20th, the police department pulled the records, and they pulled the records over a 15-minute time span, but the records show they took a 10-minute break in between. So it was really 5 minutes of work. Mm-hmm. But after they pulled the records, and they sat on them for 19 days, basically 3 weeks before they give them to me. But when they give me the records, I look at them, and I pretty quickly realized they hadn't given me all the records. So I emailed the city clerk saying, thank you for providing some records, but you didn't give me all the records. Please give me some immediately. A few days later, they give me another set of records and told me that that was the rest of the remaining responsive documents. I look at those records, and all the records aren't in there. I email the city clerk again saying, you haven't provided all the records. Please give them immediately. A few days later, I get another email. I look at it. It's still not all the records. So I email the clerk like, thanks for giving me records, and good try your third time, but you still haven't given me all the records. Please provide me the remaining records. A few days later, I get a fourth set of records. I look at them, determine that they haven't given me all the records. So I email the clerk like, good try again for your fourth time. You didn't give me all the records. Please provide them. Then a few days later, they gave me a fifth set of records. I still don't believe they've given me all the records. And so that's why it's not proper for the court to dismiss the case without having an immediate hearing to determine if I've gotten all the records. And the court also has to determine if their delay was unlawful and if I'm entitled to cost. And I'm also now asking the court to determine if it was illegal for them not to provide all the records. There's pretty good precedent in Florida that if they don't provide you all the records, all the responsive records, you know, that's an unlawful withholding. And every time they gave me a set of records, they pretended that that was all the records, and the records request was complete. So
do you think they were trying to keep anything from you, or do you think maybe it was just their negligence?
That's hard to say. The good thing about the law is the law says that it's unlawful if it's not justified, whether it's through malice or through incompetence. I'd like to assume there's a lot of incompetence, but there's definitely people in the city that hate me, and they play a lot of games with my records. So I don't have a hard time believing that they purposely withheld them. Which is a crime, not just unlawful where you have a civil remedy. It's actually a crime. An unknowing violation in Florida is a $500 fine. A knowing violation is a first-degree misdemeanor. It's up to a year in jail, a $1,000 fine, and you can be impeached or removed from office. And if you knowingly did it with a corrupt intent to provide gain to one person or entity or to harm another, it becomes a third-degree felony prosecutable by up to 5 years in prison and $5,000 fine. I think they're doing it with a corrupt intent. One, to benefit my defendants in the city so I can't sue them, but also to harm me so I can't sue them. They have their attorneys, public records experts, acting on all my records, so it's kind of hard to believe that they don't know what they're doing is improper.
Gotcha. So you know, a lot of this basically stemmed from that incident where the cop tried to run you off the road with your, you know, different, you know, making complaints and the lawsuits and things like that. Has anything been resolved?
No, not really.
Shit. God, that's insane.
Yeah, this has been going on since October 29, 2012.
Yeah, unbelievable.
I mean, we have resolved. So, I mean, the wins I've got so far is, you know, I've established precedent that at least in the state of Florida, we can record public officials, even secretly, even in closed-door meetings, if it's about official business.
Now, the 11th Circuit what states does that cover?
The 11th covers Florida, Georgia, and Alabama.
Okay.
And basically every odd circuit has ruled that you have a right to record. The 11th Circuit was one of the first in Smith v. Cummins, which is one of the famous cases, and it says, subject only to reasonable time, manner, and place restrictions, the First Amendment protects the right to gather information about what public officials do on public property, specifically the right to record matters of public interest. There's Fordyce v. Seattle, which is out of the 9th Circuit. There's ACLU v. Alvarez out of the 7th Circuit. There's out of the 1st Circuit. There's Kelly v. Borough of Carlisle, Shields v. Philadelphia, all out of the 3rd Circuit. There's Turner v. Driver, my colleague Philip Turner, that's out of the Fifth Circuit in Texas. And I think that's all the odd circuits. There's some other cases, and kind of interesting, in December, James O'Keefe, who does the Project Veritas, sued in the First Circuit in Massachusetts over secretly recording public officials and won. And when that article went out, they were claiming that he was the first person, or the first time the court had established that you had a right to secretly record and that you had a right. And technically they're right, because in my case, they never reached the First Amendment issues. They dealt with it on state law. So his was the first one that dealt on federal constitutional law. You had a right to secretly record. Mine just said the law didn't apply. There's a little weird caveat of federal constitutional rights law that if the court can dispose of your case without reaching the constitutional issues, they're supposed to do it that way. And they were able to dispose of my case. The Florida wiretap statute says it's unlawful to record a conversation without the consent of all parties, or intercept in oral communications, the language it uses. But if you read the definition of oral communication, it excludes any conversation where there's no expectation of privacy. And then there's Florida precedent that says that no public official acting in the performance of their official duties has an expectation of privacy. So if there's no expectation of privacy, there's no oral communication. If there's no oral communication, you can't intercept it. The law is not violated.
Okay, and this seems to be the thing all around. I mean, I'm out of all the cases, I'm kind of familiar with Turner Driver and how that works, but in particular, ACLU Alvarez. I'm in Chicago, and that's, Cook County is where that all took place, and it had to do with the recording cops, and they're still trying to, they're still writing laws trying to make it so that it's illegal to record police. But this around the board is true with public officials in the course of their duty, and not necessarily for private conversations between two random people on the street or whatever. You still have to do two-party consent to record those conversations, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, if you came into my house and we're talking about fishing or baseball and you secretly record me, that would absolutely be a violation of the law. We have an expectation of privacy. Florida follows the federal rules on privacy, the landmark case being Katz v. U.S., and it establishes a two-pronged test. One, there has to be an actual subjective expectation of privacy, and two, it must be one that society as a whole would find reasonable. So, you would have to either say or think you had an expectation of privacy, and it would also have to, society would have to agree that you would in those situations. Obviously, we all understand, or most people think that when you're out in public, there's no expectation of privacy, but it kind of gets a little bit funny. There's really three ways. They look at the place the speech was made, the manner of speech, and the type of speech. So, for instance, if you went into a public McDonald's and it's not crowded, and you go into a far corner away from everybody else and you're whispering to somebody, you're likely to have an expectation of privacy. If the chief of police invites you to his house and you're sitting in his living room, but you're talking about police misconduct and you're there trying to file a complaint with him, well, he's acting in the performance of his duties, so he probably doesn't have an expectation of privacy. Katz v. U.S. also said that you have no expectation of privacy of something you knowingly expose to the public. So if you're in your house, for instance, and you're in an argument with your spouse and you're screaming at the top of your lungs and the windows are open and everybody out on the street can hear it, you have no expectation of privacy. So you have to really weigh all three factors, where you're at, what you're talking about, and how you're talking about it. If you're out in public screaming at the top of your lungs, obviously no privacy. But being in a private place doesn't necessarily give you privacy, and being in a public place doesn't necessarily mean that you don't. It's kind of, most of the situations are fact specific.
Is there any circumstances that you can think of that an officer in the course of their duty would have an expectation of privacy?
Absolutely none.
Okay.
Now, I mean, let's say they have an office, they go in their office, they bring in a briefcase. They would have an expectation of privacy of what's in the briefcase. If they put something in a drawer in their desk, they would have an expectation of privacy in that. But in carrying out their duties, they don't have any per se expectation of privacy. At least in Florida. I mean, I would think nationwide that should be the case, but in Florida we have open government and gun government and the sunshine provisions in our Constitution. And so that forces all government actions basically to be open. This is something that came up in my case. They were questioning me like, well, what about a police officer talking to a confidential informant? Or what if you're in the police department and they're talking to a minor who's a rape victim? Well, I can see their concerns, but that proposes that the police are going to interview a minor rape victim in front of me. Obviously, you all realize that's not going to happen. You know, they can go into a back room away from everybody else, and you don't have a right to bug a room. You don't have a right to use like a parabolic recorder microphone that can like hear through walls. Like you have the right to do that. But if you can reasonably overhear it with an unaided ear, and it's a matter of public importance, then there's no expectation of privacy.
Okay.
At least that's my opinion. I'm not an attorney.
Right. I suppose it's a case-by-case basis. They have to, you know, see, you know, if there's instances, that's why there's case law, and that's why, you know, that way you can establish what is lawful and what isn't.
Yeah, and ACLU, I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually a really great case. I cited a lot of that case, and that case actually cites Smith v. Cummins, which is the 11th Circuit case. And interestingly, of all the cases that have been ruled on the right to record, that's the only one that's actually overturned a state statute. Illinois had the most draconian wiretap law in the country. It was the only one that didn't have an expectation of privacy provision. So it didn't matter if there was an expectation of privacy or not. Without consent of all parties, you were in violation. And the ACLU, I think they wanted to go into like the lobby of a public building or a police department and set up a camera, and that would have been in violation. So they didn't get arrested, but they used that they wanted to do that as their standing, because since they wanted to do that and they were afraid they'd be prosecuted, they gave them standing up. That's another interesting caveat on civil rights law, is you don't have to risk arrest to ask a question of constitutional importance.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because a lot of, you know, one of the reasons that I wanted to interview you and some other people is because I know there's a lot of new people out there that are interested in First Amendment activism, and I wonder if you can go into that a little bit, because I'm hoping that people will watch this video and listen and hopefully learn some things. And I think there's a lot of confusion there when it comes to that. So if you could explain that a little bit.
How did you actually want me to explain? I'm sorry.
Just how the law works as far as that's concerned.
Well, it would be state by state. So you'd have to really look at what your state law is. 38 states are the federal law, and 38 states have one-party consent. So as long as you're a party to the conversation, you can record it. There's only 12 states that have all-party consent laws, Florida being one, Illinois being one, Pennsylvania being one. And like I said, you know, you would have to look at the law in those states. At least in Florida, it's very clear. The Florida Supreme Court has ruled that it follows an expectation of privacy standard that follows the federal rules. So most things would be a case-by-case basis, and you would have to analyze it. The more in public you are, the more it's a matter of public importance. A conversation with a public official, those are all really strong factors saying there's no expectation of privacy.
Okay.
I want to be real careful. I don't want to give anybody a false sense of security. One, I want everybody to know that you can be completely within your constitutional rights and still get arrested. It happens every day. So just because you're right and you have a right to do it doesn't mean that you won't get arrested. Furthermore, some states might have like some weird caveats. So I'd be real careful recording anybody who wasn't a public official on something they were doing that wasn't in the full view of the public.
Okay, and you know, and I guess that's kind of what I was meaning, is that with the activism, is that a lot of people sort of push the envelope and think that you have to be arrested in order for these things to sort of make progress. Whereas like somebody could just deny you a right. You don't have to, you know, like let's say someone says that, let's say they try to trespass you from a place that you know you're allowed to be, you know, you could step in and say, I'm not leaving, and then they can arrest you and then go through the process that way. Or you can just leave and then file a lawsuit. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to be arrested, like you were saying, in order to, you know, make that point.
No, that's absolutely correct. It's a little funny. So now getting arrested almost guarantees you have standing for a lawsuit. Where not getting arrested, you're not really guaranteed standing. So the law is written to where you don't have to be arrested to ask a question of constitutional importance, but you still are required to have standing. So you can't ask like a hypothetical question. You can't say like, hey, I've never recorded anybody before. I have no plans to ever go and record anybody. But I want to file a lawsuit because it seems that the law would make it a violation for me to do that. And I think it's my right. That's not going to give you standing. What you would have to say is, hey, well, first, journalists and the media have no rights that aren't granted to all American citizens. But let's say you can make the claim like, hey, I'm a journalist, I'm an auditor, I want to go out. I like to record these interactions. I like to make YouTube videos. I want to put them up and publish them so I can educate my viewers. And, I've been doing this for a long time. I go to all these different places. I record. However, this one place has that I want to go record there, but it has a statute that says if I do it, I'm in violation of the law. And I think I have a right to do it, but I don't want to risk arrest. In that type of situation, you could then file the lawsuit without being arrested. But there has to be some type of ground. I think the words they use are like justicability. I went through it in my briefing. It wasn't really that interesting to me. I learned it to do the brief, and after that kind of somewhat forgot. But there needs to be like some basis that shows that you're going to, or you plan to exercise that right, and that you've refrained from exercising that right due to fear of arrest or prosecution. Okay,
good to know.
It can't just be a blue sky, like, hey, I'm just curious. Like, I think it's the wording they use. They're saying like, we're not just going to answer questions due to your curiosity. There has to be some grounds upon it. So, the more you say
actual intent.
An actual intent, and you would have to plead that in your lawsuit if you want it.
So do you watch First Amendment auditors?
I do sometimes. I used to be really big into watching a lot of the stuff in the auditing and the cop watch community. I used to really be big in following a lot of just news generally. In the last year or two, I've been kind of caught up with all these lawsuits since I'm doing half of them pro se. So I spend a lot of time doing research on the computer when I'm not working my full-time job or with my family and kids. So I haven't watched very many of them recently. I'd always been interested in the right to record for, I'm sure, since at least the mid or late 90s, particularly police officers, because I've been in court many times and seen them make false statements. And then I started following PINAC, Carlos Miller. He started in 2007. I think I started following him in 2008. And I just kept seeing instances over and over where they were violating people's rights who were recorded in public, which is the First Amendment right. And it was particularly happening in Miami, where before there was even an auditing movement, these people started after Carlos Miller, and they would go in Miami, set up a camera on a tripod, just hit record. The police would come, they would arrest them, charge them with wiretap, which didn't even apply, and the state attorney would wait for like 174 days, which is the deadline for a speedy trial, and then dismiss the charges. If they filed any of the charges and it went to criminal court, they'd have been able to challenge the statute. And they would have lost. And they knew they would have lost, and the statute would have been challenged, and so they wouldn't have been able to arrest people in the future. So what they did is they just let the charges sit over your head for basically 6 months. You go spend $5,000 or $10,000 on an attorney, and you don't sleep for 6 months thinking you're going to prison for 5 years. They dismiss the charges, you're out your money, you had a miserable 6 months. All those people from the beginning disappeared. That upset me. I'm like, how come nobody is challenging the statute? Since at least 2008, I'm like, how come nobody is challenging the statute? Why will nobody challenge the statute? Then in December 2014, I got the letter from the state attorney. And for a minute, I'm sure my blood pressure went up 40, 50 points. My face turned purple. Veins popped out of my head. Steam came out of my ears. And I was like, who the F do they think they are? And then it clicked. I now have standing to challenge the statute. So I walked out my yard. I got down my hands and knees in the grass, and I thanked Jesus for giving me standing to challenge the statute. And that was the first lawsuit I filed. Yeah, I mean, a lot of other auditors were doing it. I followed a lot of people, other heroes. Jeff Gray. Jeff Gray is just amazing. I think people who go out and do audits or to challenge to see if the government's going to respect your rights and then report when they don't are probably more patriotic than people who fight back after they get abused. I don't consider myself an auditor. I'm just fighting back after I got abused. I never went out just to hey, let me go cause problems, or hey, let me go establish rights, or let me go see if they're going to violate the law. I was just really afraid this officer was going to end up running over one of my kids, and I was going to end up in prison after he ran over and killed one of my kids, because I don't know what would have happened. But watching Jeff Gray, I learned. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. You can finish your thought there, and then I'll ask.
Watching Jeff Gray, you know, I learned a lot about records and how to do records requests. Watching Nydia Tisdale, I learned about recording public meetings and going to council meetings, and then, you know, other auditors. And I mean, I used auditor kind of as a loose term, but I mean, other people that were standing up, you know, to exercise and fight for our rights. I've learned a lot from them, and I've tried to take what I've learned from all of them and put it together in like a kind of a new package, not just as an auditor, just testing the waters to see what would happen, but as an abused, aggrieved citizen, how would you apply these to a battle to, you know, win your rights back?
Would you consider yourself an activist?
I would consider myself an activist.
Sort of by
by creation.
Yeah. All right.
I never intended to be. It's so sad. I mean, I think I was telling you this the other day. I think I estimated there have been like 4 or 5 false imprisonments. There's been at least 3 false arrests. I've had 4 false stalking injunctions, probably several dozen violations and retaliations against my First Amendment rights. At almost any point of the stage, they could have apologized and said, you know what we did was wrong. We're sorry. We're going to slap ourselves on the hand. We'll never do it again. And it would all went away. I mean, I didn't want this to become this way. I just was not going to bend over and take it and go hide in a cave. I mean, as Americans, we don't bend over. We don't go hide in caves. So,
yeah. And I mean, you know, the way things are going, it seems like that's what a lot of people do. So that's why I really appreciate people like you who are out there who, you know, no, you're not going to put up for this. You're not going to be bullied. You're not going to just let them run you off the road. You're not going to let them abuse and slander your family and say those things they said about your wife and go on and on and on just because you said, hey, that ain't right, and decided to stand up for yourself. So yeah, hell yeah, I'd consider you an activist.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I take that as a badge of honor. Like I said, I never wanted to become an activist. I didn't plan on becoming an activist. I didn't set out to become an activist. I didn't even go to speak to the cop. He had ran me off the road a week earlier, and I was just walking down my street. I used to walk through my neighborhood all the time, and I was just walking down the road, and I saw him in his front yard. I'm like, hey, that's the guy who ran me off the road last week. So I didn't enter his property. I stood on the street. I motioned for his attention. He came over to me, and I was like, look, you know, I've spoken to you before about your driving behavior. Last week, you almost ran me off the road. Please drive respectfully and obey the law.
So this cop, he lives on your block and he works for another city?
We both live in unincorporated Miami-Dade County. He works for the city of Homestead, which is in Miami-Dade County. There's 34 cities in Miami-Dade County.
Okay.
And each one of them has their own police department, but then there's sections of the county that aren't in any of those cities, and the Miami-Dade Police Department covers the whole county.
Okay, gotcha.
That's another interesting thing. Florida has 67 counties. Miami-Dade is the only county that doesn't have an elected sheriff.
Do you know why that is?
We used to have a sheriff, and they changed it, I don't know, decades ago. And now the county mayor appoints a director of the Miami-Dade Police Department. So I guess the county mayor is the de facto sheriff.
Okay, interesting. So what do you have in store for the future? Do you have any more plans, any future lawsuits, any, I guess, anything that's going on, anything that you anticipate for the future?
I don't have any plans for any additional future lawsuits. I hope I'll wrap these lawsuits up, and then hopefully everything will be settled and finished, and I would just like to go back to growing fruit trees. However, you know, I have no control of the future or over other people's actions, and if they want to continue to retaliate against me or do any of their shenanigans again, I'll file another lawsuit.
As
you know,
Absolutely.
I learned an expression from my uncle. You know, not only can I spell the word attorney, I can also afford one. However, now I don't really even need one because I figured out how to do most of this by myself.
Right on. Very, very cool. That's very inspiring. There's so many people out there who just can't afford lawyers, and you know, the information's out there.
And that's kind of what led me to start going pro se. Is it was almost impossible. I had money. I could have hired an attorney, but I couldn't find an attorney that would want to take a lot of my cases. And I told myself, regardless if I can find an attorney or not, I'll do it pro se if I have to. So I started educating myself while continuing to try to find an attorney. And then I found one attorney who agreed to take my first major civil rights lawsuit. Unfortunately, it wasn't the right attorney. And he messed up the lawsuit through malpractice, which I'm hoping I'll be able to get reopened. So like I said, it's something you got to be done.
So how can people reach you? Do you have social medias, anything that you want to shout out and let my viewers know how to reach you, or any websites?
Yeah, I on Facebook I have a page, True Homestead. Just 2 words, true, normal spelling, homestead, normal spelling for homestead. I put out a lot of my evidence there. I kind of keep it geared towards homestead and exposing corruption in homestead. But if there's something that, might happen in another part of the state or another part of the country that would affect homestead or that's related to what I'm doing, I'll publish that too. But anybody that wants to follow me is more than welcome to go to True Homestead. I'm really good. I respond to any messages that get sent to me. And that's probably the best way to reach out. I have a YouTube channel, PhD2B05.
I'm sorry, PhD2B75?
05.
Or 05. Okay, I'm gonna find that. Go ahead, I'm gonna link that in the description. So
okay, it's PhD, like Paul Henry David, the number 2, B as in boy, 05. I have a bunch of videos there, but in the last year or two, I've put most of my videos up on Photography is Not a Crime on page. I was having a hard time building followers on my YouTube. I think basically when I started on PINAC or Photography is Not a Crime page, I think I 200 or 300 followers. They have like 40,000 followers, so it gets a lot more traffic, and I really support them. They were the only people that would support me at the beginning, and so I mean, I do everything voluntarily. I put my videos up there. If they can make money or if that can help grow PINAC, I'm more than happy, for them to get it. I'm happy that I get a larger audience. But if everybody tries to do everything on their own, that's something I learned from Carlos. If you try to do everything, you end up doing nothing. And it's so hard to be the best auditor, the best videographer, the best video editor, the best, news editor. And so, if you're going to go and do auditing and then you have to go and build your own audience, it's too much stuff to do, particularly if you have a full-time job and a family. So I let the experts do as much stuff as they can. And I kind of ride on their coattails and let them ride on my coattails. And I mean, the more we help each other out, the better it is for the movement, I think.
all right.
I follow a lot of the other auditors. I follow the First Amendment auditors. I follow SA Ecstasy Prez.
I was going to ask who your favorites were.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I really appreciate you talking with me and meeting and taking time out your day to let us know some things and tell us all about your cases.
You're certainly welcome. Thanks for talking with me, and thanks for giving me the opportunity.
You're welcome.